Hello there. Welcome to Just the Discs. We talk about Blu-rays here and 4Ks and physical media in general. And today I've got a bunch of titles from Kino to talk about. And we will start with a Kino adjacent title that they distribute, which is from Cohen Media Group, and it is Made in England, the Films of Powell and Pressburger on Blu-ray. And I know a lot of people have already checked this out. It had a small, I think, theatrical run. And I would have liked to have seen it that way, but seeing it on Blu-ray is perfectly nice, and it is wonderful. If you're a fan of the Scorsese documentaries like Personal Journey, Through Cinema, and, you know, he's done several others, My Voyage to Italy, things like that. He does a wonderful job. I mean, like many of you, I could just listen to him talk about movies he loves for hours and never need a break of any kind, and this is no exception. And I do owe him a great debt because it was his fandom of the Powell Pressburger films and his commentary presence on, say, the Laserdisc for Life and Death of Colonel Blimp that got me to finally check some of these movies out. And I've been a huge fan since. They are some wonderful, wonderful films. And one thing that he brings up in the doc that I thought was interesting that just resonated with me this time is that, I mean, we've all heard the stories about, you know, he had asthma as a kid growing up, so he couldn't go out and play as much and spent a lot of time inside watching movies on TV. But one thing he pointed out that I thought was interesting was, and he sort of hinted at it before, but maybe not as explicitly, that he obviously saw a lot of these Powell Pressburger films on television for the first time, sometimes in black and white, and would be revelations when he saw them in their color forms. But he mentioned that television at the time when he was growing up, he didn't see as many Hollywood movies. I guess there was an aversion, maybe we're talking about early 50s or mid 50s here, to licensing some Hollywood films to television. I guess they were seeing it as still quite a threat. That would be my guess anyway. But point being is that he saw a lot of British films because the British studios had no qualms about licensing their films for television. So he ended up seeing a lot of British films. And it all kind of lined up for me. It all kind of made sense, you know, and, you know, comes around to that great list of favorite British films that he sent to Edgar Wright, which then he and Tarantino talked about on the Empire podcast, which is one of the great podcasts of the last, you know, 5-6 years. But I was just like, oh, of course, that makes sense. You know, British films were a steady diet for him because that's what was available. And anyway, so he talks about, you know, a great sampling, well, basically all the, from the ground up, like how Powell and Pressburger got together, and, you know, talks about pretty much all their big films. I mean, maybe even some of the smaller ones, but he definitely touches on, you know, like The Red Shoes, Black Narcissus, Matter of Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, I Know Where I'm Going, which has become one of my personal, you know, top tier favorites in the last decade or so. Tales of Hoffman, Canterbury Tale. I don't know if he touches on One of Our Aircraft is Missing that much, but the movie is over 2 hours long, and he gives you a great, I guess, for me, a sampling of his thoughts on those films. Now, the only thing I'll say is that if you've spent any time with him on some of the commentary tracks for, you know, things like Blimp or The Red Shoes, obviously he can go much more in depth in those commentaries. So for me, it's just a sort of a lighter, you know, sort of a collection of his ideas when it comes to these films. He has a lot to cover, so there's, you know, you can't go as deep on them as you can in those tracks. So I think for me, like, I know some of those tracks. Like, I used to have one of them. Did I have one of them on audio tape? I can't remember. I used to listen to Colonel Blimp commentary a lot, and So there's a lot I gleaned from that he can't go into because he's only got, a shorter time with each of these films. That said, it is an incredible, portrait of two great artists, and, kind of sad to hear how they fell away from filmmaking in one way or another. Especially the Michael Powell story is rather tragic. But anyway, highly recommended. I don't think there's any features on this, but it's well worth picking up, and definitely something I enjoyed. Okay, so let's start going through some stuff. Okay, so we have 4K for November. Why not a neo-noir like Rian Johnson's debut film Brick? One of the great debut films, I think, and just a really wonderful take on noir tropes in high school. And you have, a kid trying to solve a mystery, and some of the characters are kind of like archetypes, but he really makes them his own. But I do love Joseph Gordon-Levitt in this, and the supporting cast is great. It's remarkable what he did for, I think, don't quote me on the budget, but I thought it was like $500,000 or something. And this movie still holds up. It looks really nice on this 4K. This is a brand new HDR Dolby Vision Master approved by Rian Johnson from a 4K scan of the 35 camera negative. Brendan Fry is a high school loner, someone who knows all the angles but has chosen to stay on the outside. When the girl he loves turns up dead, he is determined to find the who and the why, and plunges into the dark and dangerous social strata of rich girl Laura, that's Nora Zehetner, who's great in this too, intimidating Tugger, drug-addled Dode, and seductive Kara, and ominous Pin, Lucas Haas, in a really great performance. But who can you really trust? So this is a really great movie. Actually, this is so good and such a favorite that I can already say this is probably going to be one of my favorites of the year in terms of releases, because it's not only a great transfer, but it's ported over a ton of the extras from previous releases, like the audio commentary by writer-director Rian Johnson, actors Nora Zehetner and Noah Segan, producer Ram Bergman, production designer Jody Tillen, and costume designer Michelle Posh. That's on the 4K and the Blu-ray. This includes both. Then it has another commentary by professor and film scholar Jason A. Nye. That's on the 4K only. That's something that Kino's starting to do, where they'll have a commentary that is exclusive to the 4K and doesn't port over to the Blu-ray. And I'll talk about another one of those in a minute. From another release. 8 deleted and extended scenes with introductions by Rian Johnson. That's a Blu-ray only. And then the inside track casting the roles of Laura and Dode. That's also on the Blu-ray only. But great for Noir-vember. If you haven't seen it at all, highly recommended. And even if you have, it's great to rewatch Brick in November. So beautiful 4K of that. This isn't quite noir, but it's one I've been wanting to check out for a long time. It is just a Blu-ray. It's a film called Below the Belt. And this is a wrestling movie. It's a female wrestling movie, as you can see from the cover. And it's pretty neat. It's gritty and a little downbeat, but also it just has some characters really helping each other out. There's a certain camaraderie there that's really appealing. But a lot of the actors I'm not as aware of. Below the Belt is a gritty and humorous drama about life on the road as a female professional wrestler in the tradition of Rocky and Fat City. I would say it's almost like a Fat City vibe more than anything, if you're into that, and I love that movie. Suggested by the novel To Smithereens by Rosalind Drexler, who wrestled as the Mexican Spitfire. It is a realistic and moving take on the highs and lows of life on the mat. Rosa Rubinsky, that's Regina Baff. I guess she was in Escape from Alcatraz, it says, but I think she's in Road Movie too as well, which she's really good in. If you haven't seen that, that's from a while back in the 70s. Is a natural at fending off unwanted sexual advances while working at a sports arena concession stand. So when she's discovered by promoter Bobby Fox, John C. Becker from Gremlins, And trained by real-life legend Mildred Burke, Rosa soon finds herself competing in the turbulent world of pro wrestling. Some of the other supporting cast here: Shirley Stoller from Honeymoon Killers is where I remember her from most. Cult favorite. She's a wrestler in this. Dolph Sweet is sort of a... he's a wrestler as well. And there's a few other recognizable faces in here, but a lot of unknowns. And gritty and humorous is a good way to put it. It's a good combination of both. But definitely interesting and worth a look for sure. I remember this was a stalwart, streaming thing on Amazon Prime forever, and I was like, I gotta watch that. I think it was Amazon Prime, and I never did. So I'm glad to finally check it out on this Blu-ray. I also recommend a movie called All the Marbles, which is from, I think, the next year, directed by Robert Aldrich, and has Peter Falk as a manager of two lady wrestlers. It's better than this for my money, but they're both interesting, and I love that you'll have these little pockets of films in different periods. This has an audio commentary by Dave Meltzer, editor of the Wrestling Observer newsletter, so that's a nice bonus. But well worth checking out if you're looking for new stuff. Okay, I got some horror stuff to talk about here. We'll start with one of these Kino Cult titles. This is called The Classic Ghost, 1970s Gothic Television, Restored and Rediscovered. Now, this is a really interesting release because, well, I'll just read the back to give you a sense of it. Virtually unseen since their late-night airings on ABC television in 1973, The Classic Ghost is a series of 5 feature-length teleplays shot on videotape. So you can kind of see from the back a little bit the quality. It is, 70s videotape, which has a certain aesthetic, which I kind of like. And beautifully preserved by the UCLA Film and Television Archive. Not only do these vividly colorful Gothic thrillers showcase an array of celebrated actors, but also are notable for having been produced by a primarily female creative team, including producer Jacqueline Babin, who worked on the movie Sybil, if you're familiar with that one, with Sally Field, and directors Leela Swift, who worked on Dark Shadows, and Gloria Monty. So that's pretty cool as well. So it has, let's see here, 5 of them at a total running time of 329 minutes. This is an all-region disc, which is interesting because a lot of Kino stuff is region-locked. The Haunting of Rosalind, which stars Susan Sarandon, among others, directed by Leela Swift. The Screaming Skull, which has David McCallum, Vincent Gardenia, that's directed by Gloria Monty. And one called The Deadly Visitor with Perry King and James Keach, also Leela Swift. And The House and the Brain with, let's see here, Keith Charles, Carol Willard. I don't know as many of these cast members, also Gloria Monty. And The Bones Came Together with Lawrence Luckinbill, Robin Strasser, Herbert Berghoff. So definitely some others where I don't know the actors, but I do think it's interesting that Screaming Skull and Haunting of Rosalind and Deadly Visitor have actors that you may be familiar with. The features are nice too. It includes interviews with Mark Quigley, John H. Mitchell, television curator, UCLA Television and Film and Television Archive, Maya Montanez Smuckler, head of the UCLA Film and Television Archive Research and Study Center, and of course Amanda Reyes, who's a big-time expert on television films and is a great part of this interview set. It's almost like it's just talking about these movies and where they came from and the female creatives behind them. It's a really neat, interesting group of interviews that I enjoyed getting some background on this stuff. It also has a demonstration of 2-inch video technology featuring David Crothwaite from DC Video. So definitely worth a grab if you're looking for some interesting stuff. This is a 2-disc set from Kino, part of their Kino Cult line. So that is Classic Ghosts. Yeah, very cool. Next up we have a 4K of Circuits of Horrors. This one I haven't had a chance to really dive into other than to peek at the transfer looks, which looked interesting. This is a 2018 UHD SDR master from a 4K scan of the 35 camera negative. Legendary screen baddie Anton Diffring plays a brilliant but deranged plastic surgeon wanted by the authorities who flees to France under an assumed name acquires by murder a rundown circus. His first recruit into his three-ring nightmare is a disfigured female criminal whom he transforms by plastic surgery and trains as a high-wire artist. Within 10 years, he builds the circus into one of the most successful in all of Europe, but when a series of mysteriously deadly quote-unquote accidents occur, continental police are alerted. They are never able to prove any crime, but when the Circus of Horrors comes to England, a detective sets out to unveil the bizarre and blood-curdling truth. George Bax writes, Sidney Harers directs, who also did Burn Witch Burn, which is great, and Yvonne Monlour and the distinguished Donald Pleasance co-star in this cult British chiller which promises spectacular towering terror. Step right up. The grisliest show on earth is about to begin. And this has an audio commentary by film historian David Del Val. So yeah, I don't have anything to compare this to. I don't have a previous release of this. It looked pretty good, but it is interesting to note that it's a 2018 UHD SDR master, so no HDR in this. And I would have benefited because it does have some color to it that would have been nice. But anyway, still looks good, and definitely one that I'm excited to check out, as Elric Kane is a big fan of this one. But a nice new 4K. This is not part of the cult line, but it could easily have been. Then we have another horror title in 4K. This is Fright from 1971, directed by Peter Collinson, starring Susan George, Honor Blackman, John Gregson, Ian Bannon, and is kind of a Halloween-ish proto, if you will, because it's a babysitter setup. Susan George plays a young lady who is going to babysit and has one of the creepiest walk-ups to the house I've ever seen. Like, she gets off a bus at night and she has to walk through like the woods. It's the idea is that this house is kind of remote, and once the trouble starts, there's a tension about it because it's not as easy to get to. But it is a really creepy walk up. So she is babysitting for, I believe, definitely Honor Blackman and I think Ian Bannon's, or is he? I'm getting confused here. Maybe John Gregson. Their kid, while they go out for a fancy dinner, and this is in England, of course. This is a 2018 UHD SDR master as well, from a 4K scan of the 35 camera negative. This looks pretty solid, I will say. I haven't seen this since DVD, so it's been a while, but in this shining early example of what would notoriously become known as the slasher movie, teenage babysitter Amanda, screen goddess Susan George, arrives at the Lloyd home to watch their young son on one fateful evening. It seems that strangely nervous Mrs. Lloyd, that's Honor Blackman, is hiding a killer secret that has just escaped from a nearby insane asylum and is now desperately trying to get inside the house. What must Amanda endure to survive the ultimate night of fright? Directed by cult British maverick Peter Collinson, and written by Tudor Gates. Fright is a midnight movie classic, an exercise in sheer savage peril and pure unhinged terror. It's an interesting one because it starts out like, she's in the house and we can tell maybe there's somebody creeping around. We don't know who it is. Maybe there's a boyfriend. Maybe there's other people involved. And so it becomes kind of a challenge to know what's going on. Is she in danger? How much danger? But we do find out that Honor Blackman did have another husband who is an insane asylum and may or may not have just escaped from the asylum. My only issues with this movie, if I have any, are the ending just drags out a little too long. You'll see what I mean when you watch it. Your mileage may vary. You may enjoy this sort of ending, but the way that it ends, just it feels like it could have been a little shorter, because I just don't dig the ending, if I'm honest. But I do love Susan George, and I like her in this role. She looks great. She is wonderfully terrified, and just is able to convey this sense of fright, no pun intended, that really is effective. So definitely interesting for slasher fans, Halloween fans, to see something that came out, in this case, 7 years before that film. And even before Black Christmas, if you want to go what's the proto slasher number 1 or whatever. Anyway, good stuff. Fright. Moving on, we have some Clint Eastwood titles here. Oh, I forgot to mention, Fright has an audio commentary with film historian Howard S. Berger, and an interview with author and film historian Kim Newman, who's perfect for this and always does a great job with this kind of stuff. Okay, so the Eastwood stuff. We'll start with Play Misty for Me from 1971 also. And this is a brand new HDR Dolby Vision master from a 4K scan of the 35 original camera negative. So this is Clint Eastwood's directorial debut, I believe. Yes. And it is fascinating. It is a stalker movie. It's also kind of a slasher movie as well, in a sense. Starring Eastwood himself and Jessica Walter, and Don Siegel's in this. Donna Mills is very good. And it is about, well, how do they put it here? From Clint Eastwood, the legendary director of Outlaw Josie Wales, Bird, Unforgiven, $1 Million Baby, and American Sniper, comes this terrifying thriller about psychotic obsession. Eastwood stars as Dave Garver, a popular radio disc jockey. He works at a jazz station, by the way, and I think that's an interesting detail, because there were a lot more jazz stations then than there are now, certainly. But that's kind of a key thing, because one of the songs he plays, Misty, this song Misty, is a jazz song, but also has lyrics. Who repeatedly receives an on-air phone request from a sexy female fan to, quote, play Misty for me. When the woman, Evelyn Draper, orchestrates a rendezvous with Dave at his favorite night spot, the two begin a torrid affair. And that's a great scene, because Don Siegel works at this, I think it's called the Sardine Factory, which was relatively new. I think it had opened in 1968. But one of the things I love about this is that, and do they mention it here? Beautifully photographed by Bruce Surtees, on location in Eastwood's hometown, Carmel, California. So it's Monterey by the Bay and Carmel, up the northern coast of California, and it's really beautiful up there. And I think that really adds a nice flavor to the film. Just the opening is Clint driving his car, and I think it was his car, up the coast, in that area, and it just is really beautiful up there. And his house is great. All the houses are pretty cool. So anyway, Sardine Factory was a local restaurant that Clint was a regular at, and I guess one of the ideas for him in terms of doing the film up there was that he lived up there. He knew a lot of the businesses, and would be easier to get locations based on his relationship with those businesses and being a local celebrity, etc. And that seemed to have worked out. But I also think, like I said, it adds something to the movie. If it had been shot in LA, which is fine, it would have just had a different feel. But part of the reason I like it is because of that Carmel, Monterey feel. But when Dave decides to end the relationship, Evelyn's obsession turns to violence. Soon everything and everyone in Dave's life becomes a target for Evelyn's increasingly deadly campaign of terror. Jessica Walter is great in this. She really plays it well, this sort of mix of tender and terrifying. And she does a nice job of sort of slowly building that up. You'll see her have these freakouts. Like there's one moment where she's in her car getting ready to go. I think it's early morning or something, or late night, I can't remember. And they're talking, and some neighbor comes out to complain, and the guy's like, hey, people are trying to sleep, and she flips out on him, and it's sort of one of the first flags where you're like, I don't know. And she's also doing things like trying to surprise him, showing up at his house unannounced, following his work schedule very closely. It becomes kind of scary and has a few twists and turns that you may be able to see coming now, but I would imagine would have induced gasps in the audience in 1971. And in this film in general, I think would have terrified a lot of people then. And I guess it's partially based on something Eastwood went through with a slightly older woman when he was about 18. But it's based on a script from Joe Hyams and Dee Reisner. And Reisner was a co-writer on Charlie Varick. But he's doing a lot of stuff with Don Siegel's guys, and it ends up being a neat movie. So a nice debut. Okay, audio commentary by screenwriter producer Alan Spencer. That's only on the 4K. Audio commentary by novelist and critic Tim Lucas. That's on the 4K and the Blu-ray. Great track from Tim Lucas as always. He even goes into detail about the lyrics of Misty, the actual song, which you don't even really hear the lyrics in the movie that much, but the lyrics are incredibly relevant to the story ultimately, which I thought was a nice touch, even though you can't really hear it. But just a great track from him. Misty Memories, interview with co-star Donna Mills. That's on the Blu-ray only. Play it again, a look back at Play Misty for Me. Also on the Blu-ray only. That includes, the cast and crew. That's ported, I think, from the old DVD. The Beguiled Misty, Don, and Clint featurette. That obviously has to do with Siegel and Clint Eastwood's working relationship. And Siegel's really fun in this as the bartender at the sardine factory, a buddy to Eastwood's character. Video essay by film historian Howard S. Berger, also on the Blu-ray only, and TV spots and trailers and stuff. But a nice release and a good-looking release of Play Misty for Me. Real quickly, we also have another Eastwood here with Iger Sanction. This is from 1975, and again, also directed by Eastwood. This is a brand new HDR Dolby Vision Master from a 4K scan of the original 35 camera negative. From Clint Eastwood, the legendary director of Play Misty for Me, High Plains Drifter, Firefox, Gran Torino, and Sully, comes this international espionage thriller set in the Swiss Alps. Jonathan Hemlock, that's a great character name, Clint Eastwood, is a retired professional assassin who has adapted to a calmer lifestyle with the pursuit of art collecting. When a close friend is murdered, Hemlock is suddenly forced out of retirement to hunt the deadly double agent that killed his comrade. The search takes him on a breathtaking journey up the Swiss Alps with a team of mountain climbers, one of which is an unidentified target. Co-starring George Kennedy, who's very good in this. The Iger Sanctions features some of the most exciting mountain climbing sequences ever captured on film. Two of the film's best features are the terrific on-location photography by Frank Stanley and the hauntingly beautiful score by the great John Williams, which folks may have forgotten, and I certainly did. But yeah, this is an interesting, and I think at this point underseen Eastwood effort. I don't feel like people talk about this one as much anymore. Co-stars the great Vanetta McGee and Jack Cassidy. Very interesting espionage thriller, good looking. Again, like Play Misty for Me, he's making great use of locations to sort of add to the film's overall vibe, if you will. And he's very good in it. But this one looks good, very good. Audio commentary by film historian and author Justin Humphreys. That's a 4K only. And audio commentary by the great film critic Nick Pinkerton. That's on both the 4K and the Blu-ray. Of course, both are included here. Freitag's Accent, interview with actor Rainer Schoen. That's on the Blu-ray only. Archival interview with actress, singer Heidi Bruhl, and by Piper Ludmir. That's Blu-ray only. And then vintage 8-minute promotional reel. That's on the Blu-ray as well. So that's Iger Sanction. Okay. Just a couple more here. We have Top Copy. Now, this is getting a re-release, and in this case, it's not just a reissue. It's actually a brand new 4K restoration by MGM. And this is a heist film by the great Jules Dassin, who did things like Rafifi, which is one of the great heist films of all time, has one of the great heists in a movie. And this is a much more light touch kind of comedic heist film, which I had not seen until this. So got to check this out for the first time. A skillful blend of romance, adventure, and comedy from Jules Dassin, the legendary director of the classic heist film Rafifi. Fun-filled and suspenseful, it's an incredibly ingenious affair and a considerable pleasure to watch. Trouble brews beneath the exotically curved towers of Istanbul when the equally exotic and equally curved Elizabeth Lipp, Melanie Mercouri, from Never on Sunday, recruits her former lover, Maximilian Schell, in a scheme to heist the pride of the city's top copy museum, a jewel-encrusted dagger. But the, quote, job soon turns into high-tension, high-wire act when the bumbling fall guy Peter Ustinov and other amateurs they've hired as help get more than they bargained for. The stellar cast includes Robert Morley, Jess Hahn, and Akim Tamiroff. Ustinov won Best Actor in a Supporting Role for his wonderful performance. That's very cool. This has an audio commentary by film historian, writer Julie Kirgo, and writer-filmmaker Peter Hankoff, which is wonderful. And yeah, it's fun. Maybe a little overlong, but definitely I get why people enjoy this film. And if you're a heist movie person, this is definitely something you need to check out and will dig, I think, for sure. But also check out Rafifi if you haven't, for goodness sake. Yeah, so that is the new version of Top Copy. And then lastly, we have a Western called Cattle Drive. And this was completely new to me, a movie I'd never heard of at all until this Blu-ray. And it stars Joel McCrea, Dean Stockwell, Chill Wills, Leon Ames, Bob Steele. One of star Joel McCrea's personal favorite films. Didn't know that, but I can kind of see it. Cattle Drive is a captivating, character-driven Western that draws inspiration from Rudyard Kipling's classic Captain's Courageous, which will be obvious if you've seen Captain's Courageous. Okay, maybe you haven't seen Captain's Courageous, but maybe you've seen Cabin Boy. And Cabin Boy is drawing very much from Captain's Courageous, the idea of a spoiled rich kid who ends up, in the case of Captain's Courageous, on a boat with a bunch of sailors that he then has to learn from, and that is sort of what happens in Cabin Boy. And this is similar. In this case, it is Dean Stockwell who's the rich brat. In this case, his dad owns a railroad, and he's on the railroad car causing mischief. He gets off when they stop to take on water and ends up getting separated from the train and lost in the middle of nowhere, and he runs into Joel McCrea, who's actually trying to track down a wild horse. And the horse gets away, but he brings the youngster into his cattle drive. And it's a similar kind of case where he's kind of a jerk to start, but slowly starts to understand responsibility. Let's see here. Chester Graham Jr., Dean Stockwell in his final role as a child actor. Oh, interesting. The spoiled teenage son of a railroad tycoon gets lost in the middle of the desert, but is rescued by Dan Matthews, a cattle herder on his way west. As they head out on the trail together, the young greenhorn soon gets an education in the value of hard work, camaraderie, and survival skills from a posse of rough-and-tumble cowboys. Directed by multi-genre master Kurt Newman, who did The Secret of the Blue Room, Son of Ali Baba, and The Fly. And co-starring Chill Wills, this charming coming-of-age tale of the Old West is terrific entertainment for the whole family. Yeah, it's ultimately a very sweet film. And I do like the Captain Courageous story, but I almost kind of like it more in some ways in a Western setting. But I do like the way they've adapted it for this movie. So definitely worth a look if you're into Westerns of this type with Joel McCrea, and I love him a lot. This is from 1951, and it's only 77 minutes, so pretty breezy runtime. Anyway, that will do it for this round of Kino stuff. There's a lot here that you can enjoy, and hopefully you can check a few of these out if they sound interesting. Thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.